everybody for joining. I'm Charlie Hurt, Kelly Sadler, our commentary editor. We are so honored to have Kellyanne Conway, who of course needs no introduction whatsoever, but we are delighted to have her on to discuss her marvelous, marvelous book. Here's the deal. It's a memoir. And let me just say, and I really mean this, having read the book myself and Kelly's read it, we both absolutely loved it. My wife is now reading it. She does not like politics, doesn't care about politics. She's loving it. My 20-year-old daughter read it and she loved it. She likes politics a little bit more. But of all the books that have been written in the Trump era, I would say, including my own book, Speechless, I would say that Kellyanne's book is the best. But if you just read one book about the Trump era, Kellyanne's book is the book to read. It is unflinchingly honest. It is it's funny. There are parts of it that are enraging and sad, of course, because it's politics. But it is a really marvelous book. And if you have not read it, I urge you to please go out and get the book and read it. Kellyanne served, obviously, in the Trump administration as senior counselor to the president, served for 3+ years, which is an extraordinary amount of time for anybody in the White House, especially the Trump White House. But of course, more importantly to America was, the reason that Donald Trump won in the first place as campaign. She's the first woman campaign manager to successfully lead a candidate into the White House. One of the things that, one of the things I love about the book, there's so much I love about the book, but one of the things I love about it is your unflinching honesty about even Trump, about obviously yourself and everybody. And I wanted to start with this question, for a guy like Donald Trump, who became famous for saying you're fired to people, could Trump have done a better job of firing people in the White House during his first term?
I have not been asked that question on this book tour, Charlie. So good for you for going way outside the box. I guess he could have done a better job of hiring some people and firing others. I think I do make clear in the book, one of the blind spots for President Trump is in personnel, only because he believes everybody is there for the reason he was there, which was to transform America in a positive way, to actually get energy independence and improve the economy and recalibrate these trade deals that had been so tilted against America, American interest, American workers, American allies, America herself, and force NATO members to pay more to the common defense, get a nuclear capable of it, to stop salivating when they look at Israel, to contain China, all these things that he was willing to do that the establishment Republicans and certainly the Democrats would never do, necessitated a team around him who agreed with that, who were there also to have the America First agenda exercised and put in and implemented. And so I think that the president always consistently believed that if you were going to serve in the administration, if you're going to be in that White House, if you're going to be the Senate confirmed cabinet secretary or deputy secretary, you were there for the reason he was there, that you were willing to give the sacrifice of time, of privacy, certainly of finances, to serve. And it was surprising to him and to many of us that not everybody was there with those intentions. And from the beginning of his victory in November of 2016, you saw the wheels turning for some of the more establishment, moderate folks saying, well, he had to promise this to win, but he didn't really mean it. He's not really going to do that. Yes, he really meant it, and he really is going to do that. And so I think he could have, looking back, are you firing more people? And I think a lot of people didn't survive because most people are not used to that kind of volume and velocity from a boss. And Donald Trump wanted to run the country like a business, do it decisively and quickly, make some important changes. So sure, but I think some people shouldn't have been there in the first place. And Trump can't he can't run around policing people's thoughts and conduct. But yes, I think if he does have a term, that is one thing that absolutely he would look at a little bit differently. He's very proud of a lot of the great men and women who served. Very proud of many of the choices he made. But at the same time, there are many people who are wonderful who wanted to serve this country who never had that chance. They were
Of
just
course.
stopped for whatever reason, opportunity. I think they would get another look.
Well, you know, it's interesting watching all of it from the outside. One of the most maddening things about the administration was, and I love what you just said, because you know that optimism, that open-mindedness and optimism that he has, he doesn't get the credit for that. But it's like he always, and it's like this with the media. He always thinks he's about to win over Maggie Haberman at the New York Times. And those of us on the outside are like, you're never going to win over Maggie Haberman at the New York Times. But he keeps coming in. He's like, if I make one more argument with her, I'm going to win her over and get a fair story out of the New York Times. And it's like, no, that's never going to happen. But you have to give him props for the optimism.
Yes, and he feels that way. And many people sort of shrug their shoulders and raise their eyebrows when President Trump was participating in many of these books by reporters.
Exactly.
Why are you trying to get that? But he would be very clear, Charlie's like, I don't know if it'll really help, but I feel that if I can get better by 10% or 15%, meaning if people actually want to cover the facts or quote me properly or not just try to get to know my character and not just repeat the caricatures. And since Maggie Haberman is, I think she's in a class by herself in terms of reporters on the Trump White House beat, but you know, she's not out there tweeting things that these folks could not get away with if they had to pass an editor's desk or if they were going to say it on TV, frankly. But that aside, it is interesting that her book is coming out a full year plus after so many of these reporter books who felt like they had a rush after January 6th and Biden becoming the president. So we'll see. But in terms of the relationship of Trump with the media, let me stay on that for a moment, because I think you're onto something very important here. First of all, Donald Trump deserves enormous credit for effectuating as president what I refer to in my book, Kelly and Charlie, as the democratization of information. Yeah. And what I mean by that is everyone, whether you're the plumber on the job, the stay-at-home mom, the billionaire CEO, everyone received an instant free of charge communication from the president of the United States. You knew exactly what he was thinking and doing almost at all times. That doesn't loved every single tweet. I certainly didn't. I was frank about it. I Donald Trump needs to tweet like we need to eat. It's just about better choices. But I thought we tweeted what was happening, what head of state was visiting, what he was doing on a foreign trip, excerpts from his speech, what the negotiations were with Congress on different things. I thought, wow, this is somebody who's using social media in a way that is informing the forgotten man, forgotten woman, and forgotten child, who cannot access politicians, can't afford to go to political fundraisers, really did not think democracy was direct or transparent in a way that Donald Trump made it both. And we should expect nothing less from our presidents now. And we have a whole hell of a lot less from the current president and vice president. And when they do put sentences together, they don't make any sense. They're not honest, they're not credible. They're in arguments with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. They're not going to win. And so I do feel that the president trying to at least, you know, he was accustomed as Donald J. Trump, the businessman, the #1 show in The Apprentice, the successful real estate developer and man about town in New York for many years. He was accustomed to talking to the mainstream media. Many of these Republican candidates are not. And so he did think he'd win them over, at least I think, and he has said this recently, he would do less of that if he were ever in the White House again, Charlie and Kelly, and he would do less of that because he feels that they're not going to be fair. Yeah. That the moment they go for investigations, insinuations, scandals, indictments that never come, et cetera.
So Kellyanne, kind of picking up off on that, we know that from the media that Trump has been doing, that he's flirting with another run. If you were to, you know, let's say prep him for 2024, what would you tell him his message needed to be to the American public? How would he run differently than he ran, let's say, in 2020? I know in your book, you were very critical of the campaign for not putting out positive ads and some positivity and show his leadership and his record, because he had one hell of a record in 2020, and it didn't translate, and the message didn't translate, and we were caught up in the coronavirus, so that's an exceptional circumstance. But in 2024, what would you advise him how to run, on what messages, and what would be the strategy?
Yes, I'm highly critical of the 2020 campaign. I felt that they had $1.4 billion, Kelly, and they record of accomplishments. It should have been more Reagan 1984 than Joe Biden, that guy that we see every day. They lost to him seriously. So, and I would like to hear his campaign managers and his pollsters and his consultants come forward and tell us what they really thought, because I know what they told Trump at the time. I like to know what they really think. We don't hear much from them, do we, publicly?
No, we
And so yes, of course. So if he runs in 2024, which he wants to, and in part, Donald Trump wants to run for two major reasons, Kelly. One is he is with the vast majority and growing majority of Americans who says that they disapprove of the job that Biden and Harris and the Democrats are doing on every single major issue. Overall, he is sad and frustrated with the direction of this country. My goodness, in less time than it takes to have a baby, Donald Trump was able to preside over the development of vaccines to save millions of lives. And in less time it takes a baby, Biden and Harris have ruined this country with the energy and the economy and the deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan. The list goes on and on. So he's with America when he says, I want to make a change here. The second reason he wants to run is because Donald Trump is uniquely positioned to say, I can do it because I already did it. And Americans always say, we're resilient, we're optimistic, we're hopeful, things will get better. They're actually saying now things were so much better not that long ago. How do I get back there? And so if President Trump wants to run in 2024, and he does, and he'd like to announce sooner rather than later, clearly I see press reports about that now, is that he should just look forward and project a vision forward, go to the future, and recognize that every great presidential candidate, including him in 2016, has that vision of looking forward and reflects the people's grievances, not his own grievances, the people's grievances, their economic, their anxiety and uncertainty, their feeling of great wrapped uncertainty and chaos and crisis everywhere we look, and reflect to them that he is the guy who can come and mitigate, if not eliminate all of that. I like vintage Trump, 2015, 2016, that joy on the job, the rallies, connect with people, those word phrases, build the wall, repeal, replace Obamacare, repeal Common Core, cut your taxes, reduce our regulations. All of that was so compelling, and people understood exactly why he was running and what they would get. A vintage Trump with those amazing accomplishments in 2020, he can be unstoppable in 2024.
Now,
So obviously, Kellyanne, there's no better listener on the planet than you. So you know that you spent your life listening to people, listening to voters. So you know what I'm about to ask you. There's kind of this weird situation where Trump has been so successful in that he not only did what he did, but he created this army of people. He has revolutionized the Republican Party. The Republican Party that you and he created in 2016 is so different than the Republican Party of George W. Bush. And there's so many voters out there who voted for Trump and loved Trump, but they're sitting there going, I would love a DeSantis. I'd love somebody who has the Trump platform without, even if it's unfair to Trump, without the baggage that maybe unfairly drags him down and creates more controversy and prevents him from succeeding. So should Trump run, and how do you deal with the fact that with those people who say, I love Trump, but I can't go through that again?
Several things. One is that there's a reason that Trump is beating Biden in all of these cage match, rematch, head-to-head polling situations, including, may I say, Charlie, in the polls that are being conducted by academic institutions and or mainstream media outlets, all of whom were pushing for Trump to get out of the White House. Even they have to admit what a turkey and a disappointment Joe Biden is as president, and how when people look at it, some lovingly and some ruefully, they say, you know what, maybe I don't like every tweet or every tone or every this, that, and the other, but boy, did I love $2 a gallon gasoline. Did I love Putin out of Ukraine? Did I love a border that he was at least trying to secure? Did I love the first decrease in overdose deaths in 30 years? And now we have them 107,000. You fill up Yankee Stadium twice and still be looking for seats in the number of overdose deaths under Biden. So they are saying that And so a couple things. There's a reason that Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in these polls, because that's the binary choice. People know what they had and they know what they have. Secondly, Trump is still leading all those Republican would-be presidential candidates, Pence, Pompeo, DeSantis, you name it, pretty handily in all of the Republican primary polling. And I think people are waiting to see what he does first, to see what happens with them. But as goes Governor DeSantis, he's been a remarkable and effective, unbelievably strong and resolute governor of Florida, who has kept himself out of the, I think, the 2022 endorsement and fundraising situation, because he himself is running for re-election. Ron DeSantis won by 32,000 votes against a very troubled, it turns out, recently indicted Democratic governor who we almost had as the governor of Florida. President Trump was instrumental in Ron DeSantis winning his primary and winning the general. I don't think that's even in dispute. But what DeSantis has been able to do, so I think DeSantis is on track for a monster reelection. He's raised over $100 million. He obviously is highly favored by donors and grassroots, et cetera. But I will say this. I love the donors. They're very successful people in life. They're lovely people. They're often wrong about who's next. And they wanted, Scott Walker, Chris Christie, anybody named Bush, Bobby Jindal, Tim Pawlenty, all fine people. And two of the ones I've just mentioned are close personal friends of mine. I won't say who, but who I speak to regularly. But I think in the case of DeSantis too, people say, I want DeSantis, and they don't know him that well. They know what they see, which is incredibly impressive. And they have to realize that whether it's DeSantis or Joe Blow or Donald Trump or Charlie Hurt, you have an R after your name, they're coming for you. So what everybody thinks is unconquerable and indomitable and electable, the media and the hard left, they will tear that person apart. And we don't know what people are made of until they're put into that arena. And we don't know. Well, listen, I'll put it this way. There's a reason Match.com and Cupid.com, whatever, all these dating sites are very popular. People love to think, to think about what they can create, what they can get. But it's not until you open the door and say hello that you really know who that is. So, and by the way, anybody who's running as a Republican nominee for any office, with very few exceptions in 2022, let alone 2024, is going to be running on that America First agenda. Yeah. This whole never Trump lane in the Republican presidential primary is more like a bike, and it's already crowded with a lot of big. We're not, but you know what, Charlie, to your point about the Republican Party, this is the party of the worker. This is the party that increasingly has voters of color aligning themselves with the philosophies and policies of the Republican Party and the conservative beliefs. The Democratic Party has abandoned Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans, many African Americans. They've taken them for granted. They're losing them electorally to Donald Trump in 2020, but even here in 2022 in these primaries and certainly the general elections that are to come. So all of that realignment happened because of Trump's policies. And yes, Trump's personality too. So I understand. Look, I think there's a big difference in any relationship, whether it's personal or professional with the voters. You leave baggage behind and you take luggage with you. And I think Trump's got a lot more luggage than folks realize.
So you think he should run then again in 2024?
Well, I think he will run. And if he does run, Kelly, it's got to be the vintage Trump message, the joy on the job, the grievances of the people, not of one person about 2020. Look, Joe, obviously the president, look at what a disaster our nation is. So we know who the president is and is. But I don't think the election was fair. I don't talk about theft and fraud. His team had plenty of time to produce the evidence. They failed to. Yep. The electors certified those election results on December 14th, and then other people had an idea to blow through that and have another fifth bite at the apple on January 6th. I knew nothing about that ahead of time. I'm still in shock, not in awe. Yes, people should not be in solitary confinement. They should not be in holding cells. They should know their fate and prosecuted and punished if that's what the law provides, and that's what's necessary and fair and just under our Constitution. But at the same time, you have so many people in the media, in the Democratic Party, these never Trumpers, they wake up every day and it's January 6th. We can't wake up every day and have it be January 6th, 2021 for half the country and have it be November 3rd, 2020 for another half of the country. As the left would say, we got to move on and look forward. People are suffering right now. Yeah. Donald Trump wants to talk about the here, then he should do that.
Kellyanne, I've got more of a personal question for you. You were such an asset to President Trump, both in the White House and on the campaign trail. You are his best messenger. You were on TV all the time, fighting for the causes, articulating his message. You by far had a wonderful portfolio. I don't know how many people realize the work that you did on the opioid crisis and the difference that we were making in the administration at the time. Now we've gone backwards. But it also, being so public, took a very bad toll personally in your personal life. And you speak about this in the book. Journalists targeting your children and trying to dox them and expose them. And as you said in the book, they came after my 15-year-old daughter, but not 51-year-old Hunter Biden. The standards are completely different. Your relationship was very public, your husband being, on one side, you being on the other side. Do you regret your time in the White House, and would you do it again in 2024 if asked to serve?
Well, first of all, the standards are very different for
Yeah.
women, and certainly conservative women. I don't consider myself a feminist. I'm a post-feminist, but because I think that they, always talking to women from the waist down only, and from the waist up is where my eyes, my ears, my heart, my mouth, and my brain are. But that aside, I think there's a quadruple standard for conservative women. And George is known first and foremost as Kellyanne Conway's husband. Find another example of that in Republican politics, conservative politics. Frankly, find an example of that in Democratic politics. We know who Hillary Clinton is because she's Hillary Clinton. My goodness, she was too much Hillary Clinton to actually warm up to the electorate and have them like her enough and trust her enough to elect her twice. So all that aside, the quadruple standard also did not take into full account the fact that I'm raising 4 school-age kids, against a mountain of resistance, caricature, insults, lies, unfairness. And then you put on top of that a husband who changed his mind about Donald Trump, about his politics, his presidential preferences, which is his right in this country, but also changed his mind about me, it would seem. And just so we're clear, for those who have not read the book, I do talk about this in the book, not because my personal life is anybody's business, but because people made it their business and have just peddled so many lies and insinuations and what they think are recriminations that people need to hear the truth. There was no arrangement between George and me that we would be the next Carville Madeline. I say in the book, if this was all for show, that we would have one foot in the Trump White House and one foot in the resistance camp, just in case. If this is a show, I say in the book, Kelly, please remove me from the starring role, cancel the rest of the season. It was money, because nobody told me this was a show and I had signed up for it. This was my life and this was my family. And it was so unlike George, who had always been privately brilliant, to be so publicly bombastic. But he found an awful lot of attention and affection in what is a very weird, perverted, contorted social media time in our nation's history. And that was, I guess that was, he was moth to a flame there. But for me, I want to remind everybody, one of the criticisms of Donald Trump is he never changes. Well, he didn't change. I didn't change. George changed. And he changed his mind, which he's able to do. But people were interested in him as Kellyanne Conway's husband, trying to embarrass me, never taking into account, A, that my marriage is not their business, but B, the effect it would have on children. Oh, the children. We're always worried about other people's children. And I would like to point out, as I do in my book with a big smile on my face, that even in my deepest, most capacious heart for Christian mercy and forgiveness and redemption, I have none of it for the people who targeted my children. These thin-skinned, troubled people living in glass houses of their own, who thought that this was any of their business. I'm not done with them. They will not be forgotten and they will not be forgiven. And I know that I know some of them are very nervous because I hear from them. And I know, like, hey, I'm having a baby girl tomorrow. Well, they know it's tomorrow, but I'm like, great, congratulations. I'll pray for a safe delivery. By the way, I hope that people treat you and your daughter better than you and your colleagues treated me and my daughter. And that's just a fact. And so, you say, do I regret it? I'm very proud of the accomplishments that I played a small part in the Trump-Pence administration. And, why do men never get asked, can you handle that job and the family Can you, I always like to say, and I said in the book that the day I announced, President Trump announced I was going in as counselor to the president was December 22nd. Folks, he won on November 8th, November 9th in the wee hours. It was 6 weeks later, I decided to say I was going to the White House. The guys I worked with knew right away what they were going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to change the world. They thought they were the president. And it took a while because I am the mom. And I had many things to consider that sometimes the men don't need to consider. And I remember Maria Bartiromo from Fox Business saying, "Oh my goodness, did you see what Juan Williams just said?" And I said, "No, I missed it. I was on my way here." And, "Oh, Juan said he doesn't know how you're going to have this big job in the White House and be a mother of four." And I said, she said, "He's getting killed on social media." I said, "Well, give Juan a break. I shouldn't have said that, since he said I should have been fired over the Hatch Act. Hello." So I later on, so I said, "Give Juan a break." But listen, if you're going to ask me if I can handle a job in the White House and be mother of four school-age children, at least ask the men I work with.
Yeah.
If they have a mistress, if they play golf, if they have some problem, like, I want to know how they spend their time. I'm very transparent about how I spend my time. 4 kids, big job at the White House. After 10 or 12 hours, go home and start all over again. Dinner, dishes, dogs, kids' homework. Where's my uniform? Where's my hockey stick? Mom, I don't understand the algebra problem. Well, frankly, their father is a couple steps away polishing off tomorrow's op-ed in the Washington Post. That makes him some kind of armchair psychiatrist about mental state, or polishing up the latest Lincoln Project ad. Lincoln Project would not exist without George Conway, or Kellyanne Conway's husband, and without Kellyanne Conway. And so, yes, I like to address it, but I think many of the questions that I'm asked about George are questions for George.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you, anybody who's not read the book, one of the best things about the book is it's all in Kellyanne's voice. She wrote every word of it, and it's that right there in an entire book, and it's unflinchingly honest. I want to go back to the question about whether Trump should run again, and just one last follow up on that. In your book, you describe a kind of a magical evening with you and the former First Lady Melania and the president at Mar-a-Lago, and the conversation you all had over a quiet dinner there. If President Trump does run again and wins, what should he do with Jared Kushner?
What should you do? Well, Jared should not work in the White House. And Jared himself has said he's done with politics. He gets to pick and choose his legacy.
Do you believe that?
Even as, pardon?
Do you believe that he is done with politics?
Oh, he says he's done. That's a convenient way of saying, don't hold me accountable for all the authority I gave myself and I was given. And I hold Jared Kushner responsible in my book for helping to screw up politics in the Midwest, and then washing his hands clean of that and running over to try to get peace in the Mideast, which is, of course, is a noble cause. The Abraham Accords are great. I'm glad we had a Secretary of State at the time that was all happening. His name is Mike Pompeo. We had a big staff at the State Department helping out. We also had his U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. We had many other people helping with that. And we had a president and vice president whose names weren't Jared Kushner. And I'm one of the people who has the guts and the testicular fortitude to take on the people who, frankly, want you to forget that they were ever there, part of this, and who, in the case of Jared, was named as de facto chief of staff or de facto campaign manager in 2020 in all of these news articles, and somehow can wash his hands clean and just be, there's nobody who's profited more handsomely from Donald Trump's presidency than Jared Kushner. And it's in the B's. If you believe the news reports you read, and I do, he's gotten billions of dollars for his fund, the fund that he has started. And I guess that's his right, but let's not pretend. Again, I was not to the manner born. I was raised very modestly. I was not, I like to say Jared's father donated, and God bless them if they can do it, donated more money to Harvard the year before Jared was accepted there than my father made his entire life times 3, probably. That's fine. I'm not jealous or regretful of that. I'm just stating the facts. And the facts are, it's become incredibly convenient for Jared to not be given responsibility for that 2020 debacle campaign, to not take responsibility for, frankly, not being there for his father-in-law now, the way he insisted on being there for 5 straight years until things didn't really work out, and being able to pick and choose his legacy. Jared's book comes out in a month. It's called Breaking History. The cover has a beautiful picture of him in front of Air Force One. And it talks about all the great things he did as president, as senior advisor to President Trump. And we'll see what the president thinks about that. And we'll see what questions he's asked about his book. But I'm very honest, I'm very good to the children, Donald Trump's 5 children, and obviously his wife, Melania Trump, who considers me a friend, she has said, and whom I worked very closely with in the White House and on the campaign. But I just think, the people are responsible for wasting the $1.4 billion and not getting the job done. We have not held them to account. And to Kelly's question and to your question, should Trump run again? Sure, if he wants to. I'm with the majority of Americans who wants Biden and Harris the hell out of there ASAP. So I will do whatever I can as a person to get rid of them quickly. But forever. But I want that 2020 upper echelon of advisors who have profited sickeningly handsomely from that election. I don't want them around. Why should they be invited back? That is the way that Republican politics was done for decades. I call it staph infection. I call the Republican consultancy that was around Dole and then all the Bushes and certainly Romney and McCain. I call them a walking RICO violation, always getting a seat on the gravy train and then making sure that their friends did, and always failing upward. Republican candidates, and I want to talking to your listeners too, Republican candidates often lose, the consultants always win. And in 2016, I'm proud to say my company lost money by working for the Trump Pence. We didn't have a lot of it. We had scrappiness and hunger and creativity and innovation, and we were breathing each other's oxygen and carbon dioxide in that foxhole in those trenches, including with Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump and Don Jr. and Eric. They were fabulous in that campaign. Donald Trump, Mike Pence, etc. I'm saying this to you because, as a Republican consultant who also was doing a 7-figure governor reelection in 2016 for one Mike Pence, and then he got off of that race and went on to the ticket. I don't regret that ever. Paid money, but lost money as a company because we got a presidency out of it that was remarkable. But in 2020, if that's repeated in 2024, if there's staph infection, same old people who did not get the job done in 2020, who misled President Trump, gave him very poor advice, lied to him about being competitive in states like Minnesota and Oregon, maybe because they had candidates there. Maybe not. I think put the RNC to the side, which was doing a pretty great job. They litigated 52 lawsuits. They have all these community centers now where people like Maya Flores can flourish near the Rio Grande Valley. So I think they became very snotty and insular. And I took a lot of time answering your question about 2024 by way of the 2020 campaign, because Romney and McCain, who ran, more than once, tended to have some of the same people around them.
No, and I think that's why Charlie led with the question, Donald Trump's famous for saying you're fired, but did he have a hard time doing that in the White House? And I think that's what our readers and our listeners, we've contemplated the personnel problems that he had within the White House, and can he structure a winning team in 2024 and then staff that team to get what he needs to get done in 4 years. And it's going to be a huge job because Joe Biden has really mucked things up. But you were an essential part of that winning team and an essential part of his White House. And so I think we'd all feel a lot better if you were on his team in 2024.
Well, I appreciate that. And he and I are tight. We talk regularly. And we've always had a great relationship. It's beyond the reach of anybody who's trying to interfere in it or cause trouble. Certainly, we both know that. But also, I think it's attractive to hire people who don't need to be there, who want to be there. And he can get back to that. Now, look, Jared Kushner aside, his kids are very valuable advisors to him. I was taught, I think I put in my book, I was struck by the comment that Don Jr. made in 2015 or 2016 when he said, this is a true family business. He said, we've always adapted and learned new things. We all had to, we graduated from college and we learned the family business, which is real estate development and golf clubs, et cetera, and office buildings, residential buildings, hotels, et cetera. Then we all had to learn TV when Dad, took on the apprentice politics. And there's something to that. They all were including Jared, very good in 2016. And I think in 2020, well, I won't say let's not forget, let me make very clear, I put it in my book, the facts are, even as I was leaving in 2020, it had been offered to me to leave the White House, take a leave of absence from the White House, go over to the campaign, shift over and have my own airplane, my own team, my own staff, and my own schedule. That was offered to Mike Pence, Ivanka Trump, Don Jr., and me. And I said, well, one of them's name is on the ballot. He's actually the vice president looking to keep his job. The other two are his kids. I have options. Like, I have to think about my kids. I have to think about, what's going on in my life. And so that was offered to me early and often and late in the game too. They saw that I could be an asset. But Kelly, I also felt like I was sleeping in someone else's bed.
Yeah.
I felt that the choices that had been made on that team, the absent campaign manager, Brad Parscale, 6'10", I describe him as height is not depth. He wasn't around. In 2016, I was around. I didn't even want to go on the Trump plane. As fun as it was to be around Donald Trump, I mean, talk about a kick. I sent people like Bannon and Priebus and Rudy and Jared. Somebody had to manage the actual campaign team and be there and be on TV, but also ask the young people for whom it was their first political job, many of them, and for some of them, their first job ever of any type. What do you need? What's going on? What are you working on? Thank you for doing that. Let me take a look at that. What? How long have you been working on that? And so that's the mama bear in me. That's the campaign manager. And I just think he needs people around who don't need to be there, who want to be there. And it's the same with him. He need to be the president again. He needs to want to be the president again for the people.
So just to follow up on something you just mentioned about your relationship with President Trump, obviously he very publicly barked at you a couple of months ago after the book came out for observing that he's not currently in the White House, I think. But so have you patched things up with him? Are you back on good? Have you had a conversation with him since then?
Oh, yes. Many conversations since then. We speak regularly, as I said, and we've got a
So
great
he's over that fever.
Yes. Yeah. And the fever, of course, was, yes, he is. And the fever was also, I think some people are putting hot compresses on his head about it too. They call it fake news. And
of course.
A scintillating main media headline that's meant to divide him from me. And then they put it in front of him. That has to stop too if he wants to run for president.
If Washington is a town where people have mastered the art of backstabbing, Kellyanne Conway is not a backstabber. You see her coming, and you better be prepared for it. And you addressed a lot of people in your book, and so it's not surprising that there might be a few people around Trump who might want to badmouth you a little bit to him.
Yes, well, they've been doing that for years. So just so we're clear, I don't say, oh, me, poor me. But just to make it very clear, I'm a survivor and a thriver like he is. And I also survived many people trying to take me down and push me out. And I won't forget that either. Many of them did get pushed out or couldn't survive, couldn't thrive in a Donald Trump White House or administration, or weren't invited at all to join us. And why would they do that? You're thinking, why not work together? That's a great question. I believe when your boss, whether it's at the Washington Times or in the West Wing, when your boss asks you to work together, or when you as the boss are asking people to work together, just do it or get out. Because the boss has asked you to collaborate, not to be collaborative, confrontational, and not be a backbiter, an ankle biter, a backstabber. And I have an entire chapter about how to spot a leaker. And because those people were trying, as I said to Jared Kushner one day in his office, to he and Brad, I looked up at the 4 quadrants of the TV and I said, well, you can't tell Trump I'm stupid. You can't tell the president I'm stupid, I'm disloyal, that I suck on the TV. I pointed up to the TV, which I said, it's really hard to go on TV, isn't it? I didn't say it to Mick Mulvaney and Ronna McDaniel there because they're actually good on TV. And I said, you can't tell him I suck on the TV. So what you tell him is I'm a leaker. Isn't that cute? And you know who the leakers are? And I took out a binder, which showed, probably had 10 or 12 examples of when they and their staff had leaked things, that meetings I wasn't in that had leaked. And I had this whole how to spot a leaker thing that everybody should read. And funnily, curiously, if not comedically, that's one of the chapters that has not gotten much play because the media are like, oh, they know that I was having Chinese while Kellyanne was picking up, dog poop in her backyard and helping kids with homework. I was with Bannon. So, that's why it's a funny book. Believe me, it's worth a read or a listen. But I say also because it's not fair to the president to have leakers around him and
Yep.
liars and supplicants who are
Amen.
just trying to ban on their connection to him. But no, President Trump, I just want to end the conversation on this, end this part of the conversation on this point. Last week, late Friday or Saturday, President Trump was quoted in an article in the Daily Beast saying, "I have a great relationship with Kellyanne. I didn't participate in the article, but he did." And they, it was actually a very endearing article, just where I actually called when he called me after the book came out, after he said that, he called me and he said, "I read your book." And I said, "You did?" And he said, "Yeah, I read it last night." I said, "Okay." And he said, "I like it." He said, "It was pretty good, pretty good. We did a lot of great things together." And I said, "We did, Mr. President." And, that book is one of the nicest things said about you, that's bound and ready to go in a very long time. I said, so, and I said, "Do you think it's a showstopper or a doorstopper? Because it is 500 pages." And so that's in the book. And I mean, that's in the article. So no, we're fine. And we've got a great relationship. And honestly, the people around should stop worrying about, not all the people, of course, but some of them, some who are new to his orbit, really should just stop, because he doesn't need that. And the country doesn't need that. If you're going to be there, put your big boy, big girl pants on and get the job done.
If you want to know who the leaking dirigible is, you have to read the book.
That
So
is
get the book and read it.
All right. Well, Kellyanne, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And I mean, for all the listeners out there, her book is amazing. It's a personal life, balancing, work life in the White House, on the campaign trail. It really is, it's so honest, and it's such a quick read, even though it's 500 pages long. It's a showstopper, Kellyanne.
It doubles as a showstopper and a doorstop.
Yeah. After you're done. All right.
Book. Some people like to put me, they tell me, on 1.5 speed. So it's 20 hours, and instead they listen to it in about 10 or 15, and they say, "You feel like the 1.5 speed anyway." So it's pretty funny. But I also wanted to thank and acknowledge to the Washington Times audience all the great work that's done there on a day-to-day basis. And now more than ever, it's important for people to get information and instruction and inspiration, and not spin and nonsense and woke as a joke, regrettable, stuff. And but also, Kelly Sadler, you were a great asset in the White House. I hope you'll consider being in somebody's White House in the future. Excellent
Amen.
communicator, voted public servant, doing a fabulous job on the editorial page of the Washington Times. Charlie Hurt, we've been on TV many times over the decades. Thanks so much for being a clear and convincing, but also a fun voice. You deliver messages in such a spirited way that I think you both allow people to listen to you and want to hear more. So thank you both very much. And God bless the Washington Times listeners and viewers and readers.
Oh,
Thank you,
God bless you.
Kellyanne.
Take care. Bye-bye.